if you'll see here, this amendment in 2026, it was done by government in March 2026. Fine. So those who studied the current affairs thoroughly and properly, for them it is easy to pick. But in order to get the good marks, you have to mention that specific section which is being amended. Fine. So here the section which is being amended, that is section 4 clause 2. So if you will be able to mention this specific section, then obviously it is going to impress the person who is going to evaluate your copy, because it is quite difficult to pick. So this fact is little bit hard fact to recall and mention in the exam. So in first instance, if you'll read the question look easy to attempt. Fine. Why? Because right to privacy, Article 21. So the very first moment you will read the first word of the question paper, right to privacy. ये तो मुझे आता है. Fine. This is I know. Fine. So you will get in the convincing mode. Fine. And in fact, those who are reading the current affairs, fine, Article 21. What happened? So Article 21, fine. Then the amendment to the transgender person. It is looking like you can write the answer even if you are not able to pick this specific amendment section. Even if you are not able to pick this one, still you can write the answer. But the challenge is to write the answer in what? 150 words. Because the temptation is not going to stop you to write about your knowledge about Article 21 and right to privacy. Fine. So you will definitely going to show some skills. Usually student syndrome. Fine. When you are being challenged, you want to show how much skill you have. So primarily and most probably majority of the students are going to explain few things about right to privacy. And how right to privacy is important for whom? Transgender person. And here you will fall. If you will shoot more than 60-70 words, you are gone. You will not get the marks, because if you are going to write in this more than 50 to 60 words, then you will not have other things to write in this answer. Because in this question, what you need to write? In this question, you have to pinpointly write about transgender person's identity issue and the problem which government is facing right now. What problem government is facing right now with respect, and why government have bought the amendment. So now see how a student who is reading current affairs magazine, fine, current affairs magazine, and the student who is reading the newspaper, how it creates a difference. So if you're reading a magazine, what magazine is going to let you know? Magazine is going to let you know कि recently government, if you'll read the April month magazine, आप आज जाके check करना. Go and check the April month's magazine of majority of X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, all. What they have did, they have mentioned about in the polity and governance section, they have mentioned about amendment to transgender person protection of rights in 2019, and they have mentioned section 4 clause 2 is being amended by the government, so that now onwards transgender persons self-identification is not enough to claim he or she is a transgender person. For that, now a medical board advice or medical board's certification is required. Fine. This is given in all the current affairs magazine. But they have not discussed and debated why government went for this and how it is going to impact transgender persons' right to privacy. This is not being discussed by anyone in their magazine. And UPSC have asked the question on that. Fine. So if you are reading the magazine, you may able to pick, but you will not able to write. To write, you should read the newspaper. Why? Because newspaper in their articles and in their editorial. Fine. And if you'll go back to the Hindus, I exactly not able to recall the date, but somewhere around 27th or 28th of March, the Hindu editorial section, they have wrote an editorial on this. Ki how a transgender person is going to face this matter. So they have wrote in the editorial and in the article. So if you have read that, then this answer is going to be what? Very easy for you. But if you have not read, then it is going to be not easy to write, easy to understand what you have to write. You have to write ki why government have introduced. See the questions language. Right to privacy relating to self-identity is a very dear to every human being and well protected under Article 21 of the Constitution. So this is a statement. Fine. This is a statement. In this context, examine in this context, examine the effect of amendment in 2026 to the Transgender Person Protection Right Act 2019. So you have to go for this statement. Fine. You have to go for this statement. And how you will go for this statement? In the introduction, you are going to write 2-3 cases. NCLT case, then Puttaswamy case, fine, Navtej Singh Johar case. 3 cases you have to mention, and there you will mention that ki how these cases in the Supreme Court, they have established right to privacy as a fundamental right protected in Article 21. So with this mention of these 3 cases, you will assert about this statement. Fine. Then you will mention that ki recently government have introduced this amendment which have created a question. What question it has created? It has created a question ki earlier people need not to go to any medical board. So their dignity is being remain protected. But now because you have to go to the medical board, your dignity, your identity may be compromised, and that creates a question with respect to human being. Dear, very dear to human being. This line you have to pick from the question and you have mentioned there. But next, what you have to do? Next, you have to mention. Next, what you have to mention? Next, you have to mention the reason why government have introduced this. Government have introduced this because this is one of the bases to provide a reservation to transgender person. And in the past, government have faced many difficulties when people have forged the document. And to prevent the forgery of the document or misleading document, government have taken this initiative to amend this so that this cannot be misused. Fine. This cannot be misused. So now you have presented, means you have addressed this statement. The first statement you have addressed by mentioning that 3 cases. Then you have mentioned what government intention is, and you have countered the government intention. Now you have to conclude this. So how you will conclude this question? In the conclusion, you have to mention that though this amendment provide much needed effect to counter any forgery, but at the same time, it also questions how government's action with the amendment to this act is going to challenge right to privacy under Article 21. So you need not to give a verdict in this question. Fine, because question is demanding what? Examination. So you have to examine. You need not to give your opinion or view. You just have to mention that this is being done by the government and this might be possible. You need not to justify the government, or you need not to say that what government have did, that is something wrong. So what exactly examination means here? Examination means here you have to present what government have did and on what basis government's action can be questioned. Close. In this answer, you need not to justify government's action, and also you need not to reject government's action. You have to just examine what government have did, why government have did, and what are the possible consequences of government's action. That's it. So how to write in 150 words? Fine. How to write in 150 words? So you can devote maximum 20 words for your introduction. Again, you have to distribute 20 to 30 words for your conclusion. Fine. And remaining 100 words for your body of your answer. And that 100 word of your body of your answer should be approximate 50 words for why government have did this and how government's action is going to challenge the right to privacy. So this is how you will distribute this questions word. Means you have to go for 25 words of intro. Fine. And that intro you have to assert this statement with the mention of that 3 cases. Fine. And then government's action of bringing an amendment, section 4 clause 2, that need to be in that 25 words. Then why government have introduced, why government introduced this amendment. Approximate 50 words. Points format, fine, heading and points format, 50 words. Then counter government action vis-a-vis right to privacy. Again, how many words? 50 words. Fine, 50 words. When I'm saying 50 words, definitely you are going to write in 60 words. 60, 65 words, and this is also going to be withheld in 60 words. So 60, 60, 120, and already you are at what? 25. So you almost reach to at where? 140, 145. But when UPSC says that 150, they also understand you are going to write in 160, 170 words. So it is not exactly 150. 160, 170 words, still you will be able to finish your question paper in a given time. But it is going to happen only when you saw the question, you highlight the keywords of your question, then you have prepared a draft, and then you are going to write. So without preparing a draft in your mind, what I am going to write in the introduction and how many approximate words are required, how many words are required for the body and the way forward, how many words are required for conclusion, and what I am supposed to write in the conclusion, what I am supposed to write in the introduction, what I am going to supposed to write in the body and way forward. If you will plan this, you will be able to finish your answer within the cutoff of 150 to 160 words, maximum 170 words, and more importantly, you will be able to finish the question paper, entire question paper in a given time, and you will have at least 2 to 3 minutes in a spare to look back your copy. And I'm telling this thing very convincingly because yesterday students have implemented and they said, yes, it's working. Fine. And I'm telling about those students who are not able to finish the question paper in a given time. Fine. When they are writing in the proper test mode, their question paper is shooting up 320, means 3 hours 20 minutes, 3 hours 15 minutes, 3 hours 30 minutes. These students are able to finish the question paper yesterday. So their remark was like, sir, marks is up to the UPSC. Fine. But what is most satisfying is the strategy, what we have discussed, that have worked very well. What strategy? See the question. Understand the demand of the question. What question is demanding? Examine, not critical examination. Fine. Not your view or opinion. Though there are the question where they have asked for your judgment. We have certain question in this question paper itself where question is asking, do you think, is it right or wrong? What is your view? So question is demanding, but in this question is not demanding. So you need not to get judgmental. If you'll get judgmental, then you need more words and answer will be shoot up into 200 to 220 words. And then you will lose the plot. At least one question you are going to miss. Fine. So focus on the demand of the question, then draft your answer where what you have to write and then write. Understood? Now, if you see the question number 2, fine. Women as a class neither belong to any minority group nor are they regarded as a forming backward classes. Women as a class, fine, belongs to minority group, fine. So women as a class neither belongs to minority group nor are they regarded as forming backward class, fine. In the light of this statement, discuss the evolution of women's reservation from local bodies to where? Parliament, fine. So see, women's reservation, fine, local bodies to parliament, fine. And what they are demanding? Discuss. They are asking for discuss. They are not asking for examination. So you just need to discuss what is. What is. You are not supposed to be Robin Hood. What should be. Fine. They are not demanding what should be. And here there is a temptation. People not resist themselves. They are definitely going to write what should be. And you will cross the word limit. And first question you crossed, second question you cross. Now 100% you are going to miss at least 115 marker. 100% you will lose. Why? Because in the writing that first, second question, you will shoot to 200 to 220 words. Here, probably you will shoot to 250 words. And see how cleverly they have put these two questions. See what they have picked. First question, transgender. Second question, women. Fine. Being as a civil servant, every student, when we ask this question, why you want to become a civil servant? Sir, I want to serve the society. Fine. This is what everyone's first answer is. And in the society to whom you want to serve? The most vulnerable. So women, transgenders comes under what? Most vulnerable. So aapke andar ka, inside you, the good man or woman is going to come out. This is the time, this is the moment where I have to show the UPSC how good I am. And you will be trapped. So this time question paper is not to make you nervous. Last year question paper was to, if you see the question paper, you will become nervous because many of the questions are going to put you in the certain condition where you will feel that whether I am able to finish the question paper or not. Whether I will be able to attempt, not finish, able to attempt all the questions or not. This year they allowed, relax. I will allow you to attempt all the questions, but not. You can go through and understand each and every question, but you will finish by not able to attempt one or two questions. So this year, that's why in the beginning I said that you are going to get less marks. Why students are going to get less marks this year? Because they will be not able to finish the question paper. Because they will be tempted to write more and more and more. Entire question paper is a generic in the nature. Questions are highly expected questions. They have asked a question on the governor, expected. Fine. Voting right, expected. Fine. So they have asked very predictable questions. They have not asked very kind of unpredictable question. Arey, ye kya pooch liya type. What is this? Fine, not like that. But they have trapped you. Fine. So that you can write in the generic way. So if you write very generic, then you will not get a marks. Now see in this question, women's as a class. So women can be considered as a class. Can we treat women as a class? Do you understand what is class means? What is class? What is class? First class, second class, third class, fourth class, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th class. Fine. So in the school there are the classes. Why in the school there are the classes? Why schools have a classes? Why they have mentioned the class? The classes are being made in the schools for the purpose of, your answer is right, to classify the students according to their age and understanding. So when we have to differentiate people on the basis of certain qualifications, then we use the word what? Class. Upper class, middle class, lower class. What is the criteria? Income is a criteria. Fine. Income is a criteria. So when society is going to be divided on the basis of certain qualification or certain trait, then the word is used as a what? Class. So you have to reject it, not to accept it. Women and men, they are being differentiated on the basis of gender, not on the basis of what? Class. So majority of the student will pick this line and start writing. Here you should not accept women as a class. Fine. Women's position in the society push the people or push the scholars to treat women as a class. So you have to start your answer, though women do not belong to a class, but because of sustained position of a women in the society have made them class. First line you have written, and the person who is going to evaluate your copy is going to be mesmerized. Wow. Fine. So the wow factor is what? From the very first line, you have mentioned that they are not class, but because of the sustained exploitation. Fine. Sustained exploitation, patriarchal status, and multiple level marginalization of women have forced to be called them as a class. So actually, you have answered entire question by this line. आपने single line से क्या कर दिया? With this single line, you have given the crux of your entire answer. So maybe he is going to read consciously line by line, but the person is going to be well aware of your exceptional analytical skill. So this is how a good analysis of a question will allow you to pick and impress the person who is going to evaluate your copy. So now you have mentioned this. Now after that, because you have already mentioned that women are being thoroughly exploited over the centuries, and even after independent India, government have made multiple attempts at socio-economic policy level. But when it is about to not getting the desired result, then government have planned and introduced a horizontal reservation. So word reservation need not to be mentioned here. You have to mention a specific word. What? Horizontal reservation. So what is horizontal reservation? So if you'll see, as of right now, reservation is for SC, ST, then those people who are differently abled people, transgender people, and EWS section. But it is not a horizontal division, it is a vertical division. Fine. So you should be in a population. You should be classified as an SC. You should be classified as an ST. You should be classified as a EWS. But now women a horizontal category. Horizontal category means here women as a group, doesn't matter whether they are having EWS or they belongs to general category or they belongs to any category. Women will be treated as a category itself. Fine. Right now, SC category, ST category, EWS category, but now you have created one more separate category. Fine. And that is why for the women reservation, the term is what? Horizontal reservation. So if you will mention this word horizontal reservation, then the examiner or the person, the evaluator, immediately pick your ability of understanding of this topic. Fine. Horizontal reservation. Horizontal reservation was introduced at where? Through 73rd and 74th Amendment. And women reservation was provided. How much? 1/3. But many states in India, they have increased it to what? 50%. But that reservation have given a mixed response. At some states, this reservation have provided a better women representation, but in many states, it is being found that the proxies are being still there. Fine. Panchayat patis. Fine. Proxy presentation. So despite this proxy presentation, government have went for more women empowerment, and government have went for Nari Shakti Vandana bill, and it is being passed. Despite it is being passed, still there are a lot of hurdles. Hurdle number one, delimitation. So until unless the delimitation will not be done, then it will be not thoroughly implemented. What is limitation number two? Census delimitation can be put in single clause because this is a 10 marker. It's a 10 marker question. You do not have a luxury to write 5-7 points. Census and delimitation should be mentioned in a single point. What should be the next point? Seats in Lok Sabha can be, again, it will come under the delimitation. Even if you are going to implement this, what? Women's reservation. Still, women's representation will depend upon party politics. Party politics. Until unless you will be not part of a formal party organization, it will be very difficult for a woman to be properly represented. So your objective was for implementation of the reservation is what? Emancipation of women and to provide a dignified equal status to women in the society. But when the women reservation is in the Lok Sabha and the legislature of the state is going to be implemented, basically their representation is going to completely depend upon whom? Party politics. Fine. Party politics. So in the party politics, might be certain groups have an upper hand over the other groups. So there is a need of a debate of subcategorization of the women. Issue is still not resolved. So women reservation is there. So in the women, there should be all women should be categorized as a women only, or still there is a need to subcategorize the women also. So that matter is still not resolved. So three important issues are there. One, the delimitation issue and the seat number of the seats. Second thing, women are going to be still dependent on what? Party political system. Third, the subcategorization of the women. So these are the three outstanding issues which have still poses a question and still force women to be treated as a what? Class. Though the action of the government of India to provide reservation from local bodies to what? Parliament is a positive step. But the existing issues which we have mentioned above that need to be time-boundly addressed. Close. Fine. So what you have to do? Introduction. Here introduction have to be go for what? 20 to 30 words. 20 to 30 words introduction. Then the body of the answer, you have to mention what government have did through 73rd and 74th Amendment. Then what government have did with what? With the Nari Shakti Vandana, fine, act, fine. After that, you have to mention what existing issues are there. 3 issues you have to mention. Then you have to go for concluding line. Plan your answer, then write, you will able to address. Understood? And what I'm discussing, tomorrow you will get a model answer. Fine. So we will upload the model answer and you will get the model answer in your respected WhatsApp group. And in this video, we will also, once this is live video, once the video will be uploaded in the channel, fine, we will attach the total model answer. Not only those questions which I'm discussing, including all the 20 questions model answer, we will upload. Fine. So what I am discussing, I'm not going to dictate you, but you will get the detailed model answer by tomorrow. Okay. Now, let's move to the third question. Fine. And again, it was highly expected question. Fine. Examine whether the constitutional office, fine, constitutional office of the Lok Sabha Speaker has been vulnerable to partition politics under current anti-defection regime. What institutional changes are required to ensure that neutrality of Lok Sabha Speaker in managing the polarized House? Fine. Polarized House. Fine. So these are the keywords. Why keywords are very important? While writing an answer, that keywords need to be precisely used. If you will not use these keywords, it will give an impression to the evaluator you have not understood the question correctly. Even you have understood the question correctly, but if you are using other words rather than specifically used in what question, it depicts that you have not a clear understanding of what question. So it is a tactic to make your answer more relevant. Fine. So you have to precisely mention the keywords which is being used in the question. Fine. So in the current anti-defection regime, fine, in the current anti-defection regime, Lok Sabha Speaker have to decide whether it is a defection or not. And under this power of Lok Sabha Speaker or the Speaker of State Assembly, this is being questioned again and again. So Quixote-Holohan case first was a case where Supreme Court have said that the judgment made by the Speaker comes under judicial review. So anti-defection law have barred the court for judicial review of any judgment given by the Speaker. But in the Quixote-Holohan case, Supreme Court have explicitly mentioned that it can be there. And in this question, precisely 3 cases you need to mention. If you will not mention, you will not get an marks. Fine. So case number 1, Quixote versus Holohan case. Then in 2020 Manipur legislation case, Supreme Court have again mentioned that. What Supreme Court have mentioned that was a very important judgment, and in that judgment, Manipur MLA case, Supreme Court, I am not able to recall the exact name of that MLA. Fine. But in that case, Supreme Court have precisely mentioned, fine, there is a need of having a tribunal system. There is a need of having a tribunal system to address all those issues related to anti-defection rather than going for what? Rather than going for decision made by Lok Sabha Speaker. Lok Sabha Speaker is more a legislative position rather than a judicial position. So in order to avoid any kind of the polarization by the Speaker, it is better to transfer this authority authority to a judicial tribunal rather being decided by a legislative authority. So speaker must be on top position in the house, and he should be head of the legislative house, and his position as a head of the legislature of Lok Sabha is correct. But when speaker is going to take the case of what? When speaker is going to take off anti-defection, he works as a judicial authority. And here there is a chance of getting what? Polarization. So it is better to transfer such authority to a tribunal. So this is an important remark made by the Supreme Court in year 2020. Then again in 2023, Maharashtra MLA case, when the Shiv Sena legislature defected, again Supreme Court have mentioned the same remark. With that, these judgments, we can say that there is always a question on speaker's authority when speaker is going to take the cases of what? Anti-defection. So there is a need to go for certain reforms. Reform number 1, as suggested by the Supreme Court, rather than having speaker as a authority to judge the anti-defection cases, there is a need to establish a tribunal. Fine. And tribunal, if you do not know the tribunal, you should have an awareness of the tribunal. Tribunal is not consist of only judicial officer, specialist also. So specialist along with the judicial officer, it is going to be in a much better than only court. Fine. So tribunal. Second thing, the time-bound manner of the addressing of anti-defection law. Fine. Case in point, Telangana. Fine. BRS MLA's disqualification is still pending despite more than 1 year. So that highlights the need of having a time-bound process so that it will be implemented thoroughly and correctly. Fine. This is the second thing you are going to mention. The third thing you are going to mention in this case is when the anti-defection law is there. So there is a need to amend anti-defection law itself. And more clarity is required to define more clarity on the split and merger. So split and merger need to be more precisely mentioned in the anti-defection law. So these are the 3 things you have to mention. Fine. And one more thing you have to mention in the conclusion, which is very important. In the conclusion, you have to mention that in order to make the Lok Sabha speaker's position non-polarized, it is better to switch to the British system, where he is not going to be fight election again and again. Once a speaker, always a speaker. And usually in the British system, when a person gets elected as a speaker, he resigned from his party position. And he can be remained speaker till then he want. Fine. So his position as a speaker is not being influenced from the party from which he got elected. Then speaker can play a more neutral role in the parliamentary system of democracy. So this is the line you have to mention in your concluding remark. Understood? Now, if we'll move to the next question. Question number 4, is the right to vote is a fundamental right? Fine. Question mark. Discuss fundamental right. Fine. Right to vote, fundamental right. The position of Election Commission of India while undertaking revision of electoral roll, can it also examine the question of citizenship of the voters? Can it examine the citizenship? How you will address this question? So this question is, interestingly, question is of 10 marks, but question is having 3 heads. Rarely it happens. UPSC is going to ask 3 different questions, means related questions, but 3 questions in 10 marker. So this is truly not a justice with the student, fine, because this question deserves to be asked in 15 marker. But this question they have asked in what? 10 marker, and because this question is being asked in 10 marker, majority of the students are going to get only 2 or 3 marks. Because you cannot justify this 3 part in 10 marker. You are going to miss something and they will have a chance to cut your marks. So that is why I was saying that this question paper is looking easy to answer, but difficult to get marks. Why? Because you will not able to justify. And when you will not able to justify in the given word limit, they will not consider. They will consider that you have to write this, you have not written. And that is why we are going to deduct your marks. So this answer need to be written very smartly. Very smartly means the first question which is being asked, either you have to answer in the introduction itself, or you have to answer this question in the concluding line. Either you have to write it where? In the introduction itself, or you have to conclude with where? Conclusion. Fine. If you'll go for the conclusion, it need more craftiness. Fine. Because you have to hold a nerve. Because the last line should be mentioned about. That is why we can say that right to vote is not a fundamental right. So you have to wait for that moment. And sometimes in the anxiety, people forget that. So it is better to write in what? Introduction itself. So start with fundamental right. Right to vote is a legal right mentioned in Article 326. Fine, 326. And it's a legal right, not a fundamental right. However, over the period of time, and especially when Election Commission have started intensive electoral roll revision, this question went again and again to the Supreme Court, and the way Supreme Court have examined that question, that explicitly says that it is not looking the right only as a legal right, but more than that. So this is the line you have to mention in what? Introduction. And you have set the tone. Now you have to mention in the body RP, Representation of People Act, which empowers the Election Commission along with Article 324 to go for what? Intensive roll revision. And while going for intensive roll revision, fine, Election Commission have mentioned certain set of the documents, and these set of the documents also depicts citizens' question. So that is why this question arises, ki whether Election Commission of India have a power to question the citizenship of the voters. Though Election Commission do not have an explicit power to ask the citizenship status, but Election Commission of India, while going for intensive roll revision, they can demand for certain document to proof of the citizenship in the context of that constituency. So maybe you are not required to bring as a citizen of India, but certain documents you need to present to ensure and to provide a proof you are citizen of that particular constituency. So because you are a person of that constituency, it can be proved only when you are a citizen of India. So though Election Commission do not have an outright power to question the citizenship, but for the purpose of intensive roll revision, they can test your citizenship with respect to that particular constituency. So in this way, Election Commission get the implicit power to examine this, and this is well approved by whom? Supreme Court in their judgment in the SIR case. But it is not unlimited and qualified in the nature. The documents which is being demanded by the Election Commission should be based on identifying a person belongs to that constituency and not citizen in general. So when Election Commission is going to demand a proof under the SIR, that proof should not be in general to proof of what? Citizenship. That should be a proof for the purpose of identifying a person belongs to that particular constituency as mentioned by whom? Supreme Court. So whether Aadhaar is applicable in SIR? Aadhaar card is applicable in the SIR? One of the document which need to be produced to prove SIR, Aadhaar card. But what Supreme Court have said on the matter of Aadhaar card? It is not a proof of citizenship. So Election Commission do not have a power to examine what? Citizenship. Now see what, this is what I have discussed. Fine, brainstorming. Now see the exact questions demand. Is the right to vote is a fundamental right? No. Discuss the position of Election Commission of India while undertaking revision of electoral roll. Fine, electoral roll. Can it also examine the question of citizenship of voter? So first you have to mention this answer in the introduction itself. Right to vote is not a fundamental right. It's a legal right vested in Article 326 of Constitution. Fine. However, over the year and especially in the context of SIR, SIR conducted by the Election Commission, Supreme Court have further examined the power of the Election Commission and more asserted right to vote as a right for the citizen. Fine. Now you have to give a heading of what? Power of Election Commission to conduct intensive roll revision. Then you have to mention section of RP Act if you are able to recall, but if you're not able to recall the section of the RP Act, Representation of People Act, then you can mention that under Article 324 and Representation of People Act, Election Commission have power to go for 3 type of roll revision, and one of that intensive roll revision, which is being started by the Election Commission from the state of Bihar's election, and now it is going to be conducted at pan-India level. And during this process, certain questions have arrived, and one of the fundamental question is with respect to the person's identity as a part of constituency. But person's identity as a part of constituency is being seen as a person's identity as a citizen. Supreme Court have addressed this matter by saying that Supreme Court said that Election Commission have a right to conduct the SIR, but with certain riders. Means Election Commission do not have an unlimited power to check any document with respect to citizenship status. But Election Commission can check all those documents which are required to set that person as a part of constituency. Hence, Election Commission do not have a power to oversee the citizenship of a voter. Understood? So, in this question, if you are not going to mention RP Act, you are not going to mention constitutional articles, you will not get a marks. Fine? Marks will be not rewarded. Okay? Now, this was a very generic question, Do constitutional bodies like National Commission for Scheduled Caste and National Commission for Scheduled Tribe possesses adequate enforcement power to secure substantive social equality? Suggest measures to enhance their institutional effectiveness. Fine. So in this question, the constitutional bodies like NCSC and NCST. Fine. Two commissions are being formed by the Constitution for the purpose of welfare of whom? Scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. But in this existing framework of the constitutional provision, they do not have a power to enforce. So that is why sometimes such constitutional bodies, including Human Rights Commission, fine, such constitutional bodies, as well as, not including, as well as certain other commissions like Human Rights Commission, are being called as a toothless tiger. Fine, they are called as toothless tiger because their recommendations are not enforceable on the government. Of something which is not enforceable, what is the solution? Make them enforceable, and not only make them enforceable in the time bound manner. And if any of their suggestions are going to be rejected, then the explanation must be provided by whom? Explanation must be provided by the government. Number one. Number two, you also have to mention not only you should look for a passive purpose. When they will give the recommendation, only then you are going to implement that. There is need to provide them more active role. And how you can provide more active role? Government should allow their involvement in the policy making level. So whenever government is going to make any policy with respect to the welfare of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, then that policy of the government, any legislation of the government in that context must involve whom? These two commissions. So this need to be mentioned there. So three things. One, their recommendations should be not only what suggestion the nature, they must be implemented in the time bound manner. Fine. Their recommendations should be more enforceability. Third, their involvement should be more and more at proactive level in the policy making rather than providing just a passive role, what they do have right now. So in the present structure, though the effort made by the government of India to provide them a constitutional status and to work for the welfare, that shows positive notion, but it is not sufficient. In order to make them more relevant, their recommendations should be mandatory to implement. Second, in the time-bound manner. Third, they should be allowed to actively involve in the policy-making level when the policy is concerned with scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. And this should not be only for these two constitutional bodies. Apart from these two constitutional bodies, any other constitutional bodies like Finance Commission should be implemented in the same framework, because question language is constitutional bodies. So your conclusion should be focusing on these two, but also address what? But also address constitutional bodies in general in the nature. So this conclusion need not 30 words. This conclusion needs actually 50 words. Fine. So here you have to bring more space for what? Your concluding remark. It might be divided into two paragraphs, 2.5 line, 2.5 line, last 2 line. So do not hesitate for this. Means usually what we recommend, write in what? Heading and points. So introduction and conclusion in the paragraph, and body and way forward in heading and points format. Usually I always say that write the conclusion in maximum not more than 3 to 4 lines. But here you can spend more words for writing the conclusion in the better manner, because question is demanding for what? Suggestion. Fine. Question is demanding for suggestion. Not only these two. See, if the question was supposed to only for these two, they can simply write, they can remove this line here. This line, they can remove. They can remove this line and they can read the question here like, National Commission for Scheduled Caste and National Commission for Scheduled Tribes possesses inadequate enforcement power to secure substantive social equality. And remember that in conclusion, this word need to be what? Expressly mentioned. Social equality. Fine. Social equality. So that social equality word need to be mentioned in your concluding remark. Understood? Now, if we'll move to the next question, fine. Does India's tribal development policy reflect aspirations of socially grounded and equity-based governance? Justify your answer. Fine. So here they are asking for your opinion. Fine. Now you have to provide your clear-cut opinion. So if I'll ask you the same, does India's tribal development policy reflects aspiration of socially grounded equity governance? Yes or no? Yes or no? Are yes or no? Yes. How? If yes, do you think they have asked this question? How you will frame your answer? How you will frame your answer? Okay. How will start your answer? Opening words. This question is all about this. Whenever the question is asking such language, does India's tribal development policy, does India's infrastructure development policy, does India's women's protection policy, does India's this policy, that's policy, and end with what? Justify your answer. So this is a basic frame of a question. In this frame, they have put what? Tribal development policy. So that frame can be changed with what? Rather than tribal development, economic development, social development, infrastructure development, educational policy. Fine. So tribal development will be replaced by what? I will replace it what? Okay. I'll replace this with the education policy. Does India's education policy reflect the aspiration of socially grounded and equity-based governance? Justify your answer. Same question. Fine, but the frame, the main topic is not the tribal policy. Main thing is, do you know how to address these questions? If you do not know how to address this question, doesn't matter question is on tribal policy, any policy, foreign policy, any policy, you will not able to answer. You will not able to answer means you will not able to get the marks. You will able to answer. Of course, no one is going to stop you to write the answer in the exam. Fine, you will write, but you will not get the marks if you do not know that. Fine. So such answers, such questions, introduction will start with the positive notion only. But the introduction itself put certain question for the body of the answer. So how to write this answer? The introduction is very important. Introduction, you should not reject the government of India's tribal development policies or total failure. Government of India's tribal development policy is exceptionally successful. outrightly successful. If you start this word, then your answer is going to be in the complete disarray, because you have outrightly rejected or you have outrightly accepted that is right or that is wrong. So what you need to do is, in such questions, you have to mention how government is making an effort to address those issues, but still there are certain lacunas in it, certain issues in it. Fine. So tribal development policy is one of the core theme of government of India since independence. Multiple steps has been taken by the government. For example, extension of Panchayati Raj in the tribal areas. However, forest right, you can mention extension of Panchayati Raj, PISA you can mention Forest Right Act, then you have to write. However, still there are certain areas where this policy need to be what? Need to be further improved in order to address the today's issues faced by whom? Faced by the tribal people. Now see, because it is a tribal policy, fine. So one thing with respect to the tribal policy, any kind of the question the tribal, whenever question will related to tribal will come, remember the golden line. Fine. Or write it here. Fine. If a question is related to what? Tribal policy. Tribal policy should not be coming from top to bottom approach. Tribal policies must be 100% coming from what? Bottom up approach. Means the involvement of the tribal people is must, non-compromisable. Any tribal policy should have maximum engagement of whom? Maximum engagement of tribal people itself, in order to resolve their issues and providing better development. So if you know this theme, you can answer this question very easily. Introduction, set a tone with the governments of India effort, but not enough. Then mention explicitly what efforts made by the government of India. Then mention these efforts have produced certain good result, but not enough, and that is why these are required to be implemented. And while implementing, fine, while implementing, ensure that in every level of the tribal policy, the maximum engagement should be of whom? Tribal people. Close. Fine, close answer. That's it. And remember that the golden word of your answer should be in the conclusion. Fine. So students are always confused. Sir, conclusion mein kya likhe? What should I write in the conclusion? I have wrote everything in what? The body of the answer. Now I do not have anything to write in the conclusion. So always pick one point which you are supposed to write in the body, or way forward, you have to reserve it for what? Conclusion. Fine. So one specific portion of way forward, whenever the question is asking, fine, justify your answer. Fine, justify your answer. So for justifying your answer, what you need to do, you have to mention certain government's effort, government policies. Fine, but question need to be finally concluded with such a impactful words, which might be not factual in the nature, it should be impactful of the policy of the government. Fine. So the question is basically belonging to what? This question is hang between two subjects, polity as well as what? Governance. So primarily governance teacher will claim, fine, but without polity, the answer cannot be successfully written. Fine. Of course, you have to mention many of the government policies. आपने कोई structure बनाया government policies का? Do you have any structure of the government policies, tribal welfare policies of the government of India, education welfare policy in India, what policies made by the government of India for education sector, what policies is being made by the government of India various sectors? बनाया कुछ? सोचा है कभी कुछ बनाने का कि लेट्स मेक अ डॉक्यूमेंट वेयर आई एम गोइंग टू मेंशन अबाउट द पॉलिसीज ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया? नहीं. Huh? You have? Okay, good. So that is always being very helpful. Paper 2, paper 3. Both paper, you are going to get an advantage if you are going to have such government policies. Fine. List of the government policies. Or you people need to do it. And it is not very difficult. Earlier, what you need to do, fine, there is a book. Fine. There is a book called India Yearbook. Fine. India Yearbook. Publication Division of Government of India publishes India Yearbook. And the only reason to purchase that book for the civil services aspirant is you can get all the government data, official data, plus all the government policies and schemes. Now that work can be easily did by artificial intelligence. You just have to pay some more attention and ask to go for authentic documents of the government. So the entire India Yearbook, that was something like 400 pages. And the big headache to read it. Now these days you are having the compilations and all, use it. I am not saying that you should not look over magazines and materials. Whatever is good, you can have it. Fine. So remember that government policies, you will get 2 to 3 questions in the mains examination and 2 to 3 questions minimum in the prelims examination with respect to what? Government policies. Fine. Tribal, education, women, farmers, vulnerable section. These are the 4 or 5 areas where under which you will find the government schemes. You can deploy the GPT or Claude or any artificial intelligence and ask like, I want all recent government policies in past 14 years, 15 years. What policies have been introduced by the government of India for the tribal welfare, for women's welfare, for children's welfare, fine, for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe and other vulnerable section. So I think it will take 2 hours effort, but you are going to have all the government schemes at one place. Then convert into the Word file, take a printout, and whenever you are going to find any new addition or any change in that policy, edit in your document. So systematization will take time, but that systematization, once a systematization, you will be always exam ready. The document will be exam ready. Prelims will come, read that document. Mains will come, read that document, and it will enhance your answer. Fine. So this is why it is important. Please do that. But I know that you are not going to do that. Right? I know that. I have already did half of the job. Fine. In fact, for this year's main student, I have already given. Fine. So I'll provide you also for the prelims exam. When the prelims exam will about to approach for you people. Fine. Okay. But have an eye on that. Means what government schemes are being in the news on regular basis. Okay. Now, this is a very common question. Malnutrition in India is not merely a public health concern. It is also challenge social equity, human development, and effective welfare governance. Fine. So see, malnutrition is what? Public health concern. It is also what? It is also social equity. It is also what? Human development. Fine. Welfare governance. So you know, with this diagram you come to know that I have to drive my answer on this basis. Fine. So malnutrition, how you start this answer? In order to start this answer, you must have certain data. Global Hunger Index, position of India in 2025. Global Hunger Index, India's position in 2025. In the governance question, if you do not have a data, you do not have a marks. Governance, again I am repeating my line. If in the governance topic you do not have the schemes and data, you are not going to get a marks. That's for sure. 100% true. So if you are not going to anchor the global hunger data, you are not going to get a marks. Fine, you will not get a marks. So India's position was 202. 202 position was there. Fine. So India is one of the bottom ranking G20 country in the global hunger index. In fact, India is a bottom ranking country among G20 countries in global hunger index. Fine. So global hunger index, India have lower positioned. Fine. So in this context, when we talk about malnutrition, so malnutrition in general is considered as what? Is a public health concern. But malnutrition usually happens because of people's ability to earn and their social status also. So when we talk about malnutrition, we should not only focus it as a public health challenge, but also see as what? Social equity, human development, and effective welfare governance. So in that context, you have to mention the data of Niti Aayog. Fine. And National Family Health Survey 6 data. And some people are sitting in the class who attended my economics class. Fine. And I told explicitly them that NFHS 6 data is going to be anchor in this year's exam. Or example aapke samne hai. So if you know this NFHS 6 data, you will able to answer this question. If you do not have the data, you cannot answer. What you will answer? Yes, social equity is very important to address up malnutrition. यही सब लिखोगे, marks नहीं देगा वो. This is data-centric question. Data, marks, no data, no marks. Minimum data, minimum marks. Maximum data, maximum marks. So it's simple data-driven question. Fine. I cannot discuss nothing much in this question. In fact, all the governance question, fine, all the governance question are basically data-driven question, as I said that. So if you have data, you can answer. If you do not have a data, you cannot answer. Because understanding a question is not very difficult thing. In this question, there is nothing challenging to understand. Question is simple, straightforward, crystal clear. Malnutrition is not public health concern. It is a social equality, human development, and effective welfare governance. Fine. So what government is doing to maintain the effective welfare governance? What government is doing for social equality? What government is doing for considering as a human development? And where the requirement is there to improve it. Fine. So what government is doing? Data. What government need to do? Scheme. So governance questions are anchored around what? The governance questions are anchored around data and scheme. Data, what government is doing. Schemes, then you can mention for what purpose, way forward purpose. So see, when you see the governance question, fine, governance question is always an issue-based question, right or wrong? Right, I'm telling you. Fine. So governance question is always a issue-based question. And how to address the issue? Fine. First, define the issue. So malnutrition is the issue. So you can briefly mention what is malnutrition. Fine, briefly mention the malnutrition. Then you have presented data about the India's position, the global hunger index, which shows that it's a big public health issue in India. But that public health issue is not automatically generated. That issue becomes public health issue because it is an issue of social equity, governance, welfare, governance, development, as well as what? As well as overall human development. And in order to address the issue, government is doing this. Fine. What government is doing for social equity? What government is doing for human development? What government is doing for what? Welfare, governance, scheme, data. Then in the way forward, again, what improvements are required in that existing schemes? Fine. Close. This is a standard format of 99.99% of governance question. 0.1% question I will set aside because one question is here where such things are not going to work exactly. But in the governance question, this is a standard way of writing an answer. So your knowledge in your analytical skills are not going to be work very much. Your knowledge with respect to memory of the data and the schemes are going to work here. So polity paper, facts plus analysis. Governance paper, 90% facts, 10% analysis. Polity paper, 50% data, 50% analysis. IR question paper, IR questions, international relations questions, 70% your analytical thing and 30% is data anchoring. Because with the few data, you have to do what? You have to do the analysis. Fine. If you know Sagar Mahasagar, then you can attempt this question of Indo-Pacific. Fine. So few data is required in the IR. But more and more data is required in which questions? Governance question. So this is how UPSC test you in this GS paper 2. Fine. Now, next question. Fine. Analyze the advantages and limitations of generalist structure of India's civil services in contemporary governance. Fine. What you have to analyze? Analyze the advantage and limitation. So, are you okay with the general structure of Indian civil services? Indian civil services structure is generalist in the nature. Is it right or is it not right? Is it right or is it not right? See, if you have an idea of civil services, fine. Usually what happens in the beginning? Fine. In the beginning, it is generalistic in the nature. But as you will move up in the ladder, more and more specialization usually happens. But despite this fact, evidences also shows that the person who was working in the revenue department, he was being transferred into the forest department. A person who is working in the police department, he will be remain the police department, specialized. Forest department remain specialized. But other jobs, fine, you are working in one ministry, then you are being transferred into the other ministry. So in this way, what happens? The person is going to remain journalistic. And because the person is going to remain journalistic, for example, it is being criticism by one of former army officer, like he was a 4-star general rank officer. He said that not army officer, naval officer, commodore rank officer, he said that sometimes the bureaucrats sitting in the defense ministry, they do not know the difference between a frigate and destroyer. And they are going to discuss this matter of purchase of the destroyer with the Russia. So the person who is going to negotiate to purchase a destroyer worth 10,000s of crores, he or she even do not know the basic difference between a type of ship which is called destroyer and frigate. So the idea is, in order to make civil services more effective, both are required. Generalistic is required as well as specialized is required. And the idea is, in the lower ladder, it should be more generalistic in the nature, and as the civil servants move upwards, more and more specialized things are required. So how to address this question? You have to first accept Indian civil services is basically journalistic in the nature. And this journalistic nature of Indian civil services have both advantages as well as limitations. Fine. Advantages, people are able to work in any department, not required any specific training and other things. But at the same time, because they are journalistic in the nature, they sometimes not able to either understand the issue completely, or they are having able to access those things in a more journalistic manner. But in this question, if you will pay attention, they are asking on what? Contemporary governance. So if you will anchor your answer in general, then you will not get a marks. You have to mention what? Contemporary governance. And e-governance is no more contemporary governance. Because e-governance was at my time also. So I do not belong to contemporary time. I'm older generation processor. Fine. Your contemporary challenges are what? क्या है contemporary challenge governance में? बोलो. What are the contemporary challenges? अरे contemporary challenges तुम लोगों को नहीं मालूम. What are the contemporary challenges? India have recently conducted a big summit. Artificial intelligence, climate change, urban waste management. Fine, urban migration, rural migration. These are the contemporary challenges. ये तुम्हें लिखना है. So for these, do you think that कि only generalized civil servant is able to address this issue? नहीं. बहुत सारे ऐसे सिविल सर्वेंट्स हैं जिनको लगता है चैट जीपीटी आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस है. They are not aware of Claude. Sorry to say, but one senior civil servant वो क्लॉड भी नहीं बोल रहा, कॉड बोल रहा है. मैं कॉड ये कौन सा आ गया नया? ठीक है, दिन भाई कॉड नहीं वो क्लॉड है. Fine, Claude. Fine, and Claude. अच्छा, by the name he thought that he is from that artificial intelligence or from France. अरे फ्रांस से नहीं भाई, यूएस से ही है. Fine. Now Claude, then Anthropic क्या है? Like, Anthropic is a company who is having a product, what? Claude. So they even do not have a very basic understanding about this. Fine. LLM नहीं पता उनको. So if you are being a secretary of your department and you are not even having the basic understanding about that particular specific area, then it is going to be very challenging. Fine. So civil servants need to have specific specialization in order to address contemporary challenges. But it doesn't mean that they have to completely give up what? Journalistic characteristics. They can go for initially what? Journalistic, then later on what? Later on the specialization in order to address the contemporary challenge of the governance. So question is not here. Question is where? Are you able to identify those contemporary challenge or not? Because public who is going to write the mains examination, they are well versed with the advantages and limitation of journalistic structure of the civil services. All the books on the governance, all the notes on the governance are going to address this matter. कोई भी आप गवर्नेंस का नोट्स उठा के देख लो. Anywhere you will find the governance notes or governance book, they are going to address this matter. But what UPSC was? Contemporary challenge. Fine. And these are the contemporary challenge, and in that context, it need to be addressed. Fine. Now, I think this questions, IR questions, Raja have already discussed. So let's go for what? Let's go for question number 11. Discuss the position of governor in the federal polity of India. And by looking this question, fine, people who are writing the mains examination, their smile is like this. Aa gaya, wah, maza hi aa gaya. They are very happy to see this question, and especially in what? 15 marks. Discuss the position of governor in the federal polity. What is the nature of his power while giving assent to the bill passed by the state legislature? Is he bound by aid and advice of the Council of Ministers in his all functions? Fine. So this question is relatively easy because question demanding what? Discuss. Now, here you have to bring all those memories from 2024 onwards. Tamil Nadu case, 2 judges bench, fine. And see, similar question, fine. Similar question I have framed in PSIR test series. Fine. Political Science International Relations test series this year, which I have conducted. In that test series, almost similar question. I'll find, I'll tell you the question. So similar question I have mentioned. One student, she was writing the answer. What she have mentioned from the presidential reference. Fine, presidential reference. And I told you, no, you cannot mention from the presidential reference. You have to mention from the 2 judges bench order. Fine, because a presidential reference came in the response of the judgment of 2 judges bench of whom? Supreme Court. Then the presidential reference was being made and then Supreme Court have clarified. Fine. So what happened? That Supreme Court 2 judges bench have compelled governor on what matter? The 2 judges bench. See, this question looks very easy. But to answer this question, this is going to be the anchoring. What going to be anchoring? Is he bound by aid and advice of his Council of Ministers? Because all the matters in the federal polity with respect to the governor are coming because of this question only. So in the beginning itself, you will mention that the constitutional position of governor in India over the years since independence is hovering around this question. Which question? Is he bound by the aid and advice of Council of Ministers? Fine. And in 2024-25, Tamil Nadu governor case, 2 judges of the Supreme Court bench, they have settled this. And they have not only bound the governor, but they also have put an obligation on whom? President. Fine. However, then presidential reference went to where? Supreme Court. And in that presidential reference in the Supreme Court, in that presidential reference to the Supreme Court have asserted. What Supreme Court have asserted? While answering the 13 questions presented by whom? President of India. तो marks यहाँ पर आपको किस पे मिलेंगे? All data and facts with respect to this question. Students are expecting to get maximum marks, but I'll tell you, in this question, majority of the students are going to lose the marks because you are not going to anchoring all the relevant articles, Supreme Court's judgment in 2 judges bench case, then 13 questions posed by the president, and then Supreme Court's judgment by the 5 judges bench. Then you will get a marks. Fine. So ultimately what happened in this case? Supreme Court said that finally governor is not bound by aid and advice of Council of Ministers in all the cases. So the entire episode of the Tamil Nadu judgment, then presidential reference and Supreme Court clarification have ultimately resulted in the position of governor is not bound on aid and advice of Council of Minister in all functions. But Supreme Court have also set a tone here. The power of the governor is no more completely discretionary in the nature. Supreme Court can see that and override whom? Governor's position. So this is how you are going to write this answer in the analytical way. 3 parts. 1, Tamil Nadu case. Second part, presidential reference and the Supreme Court's order. Third, the analysis of Supreme Court's judgment. And then you are going to answer this question. So introduction about governor. Then in the body, first heading, Tamil Nadu case. Second heading, the presidential reference and Supreme Court judgment. In both points, three points need to be mentioned. Then governor's position in the federal policy. That will be the third heading. And under that, you will write and finally you will conclude. So this is how you have to structure this answer. What is mean by judicial legislation? Fine. They are asking directly one definition. In this context, discuss the verdicts of apex court, allowing passive euthanasia and living will. Fine. So this question is not difficult to understand. Question is straightforward. And in fact, if you know certain definition, what is living will, you know what is judicial legislation, and you have an idea of passive euthanasia, it is easier to answer in comparison to previous question. Fine. So though the judicial legislation here is a question. So what major mistakes is going to be committed by the student? They'll give the definition of judicial legislation only in the context of what? Passive euthanasia. But in this question, you need not to anchor the definition of judicial legislation in context of only passive euthanasia. In fact, in this question, what you need to do, you have to provide a definition of judicial legislation. And can anyone tell me when first time judicial legislation was taken by the court in India? Achha, what is judicial legislation? Judicial legislation is a set of guidelines set by whom? Supreme Court, in order to address certain issues and matters which remain unanswered or unaddressed by legislature. It is the responsibility of the legislature to legislate. But if the legislature have not legislated and still it is being pending or delayed, but it need to be addressed on urgent basis, then Supreme Court set guidelines. So can you tell me when the Supreme Court famously took this judicial legislation first time in India? Answer is the case of Vishakha versus state of Rajasthan case. Here Supreme Court have given a guidelines against workplace harassment. Fine. And since then, Supreme Court time to time in various cases, they have given this. In India, euthanasia, fine, and surrogacy is a long pending matter. And in various matter, government and parliament have not legislated. And that is why Supreme Court have to step in order to provide certain guidelines through judicial legislation. For example, in the case of passive euthanasia. In fact, in the case of euthanasia, first of all, Supreme Court have rejected the concept of active euthanasia and put in the domain of whom? Government to legislate. In the case of passive euthanasia, Supreme Court have opted case-by-case approach based on what? Based on living will. What is living will? What is living will?
person will like that if he is going to be in long-term coma or
Yeah. Understood. So basically, thank you. Good. So basically, living will means what? Whether the person is able to sustain his life or not. Right to die with the dignity is one thing, but basic concept is living will. Living will means what? If a person is on life support and the hope is there, person can be come out of this life support and he can be better. But if a person is going to be remain on that support and it is vegetative state and person is not able to reverse it, so that life is going to give him more pain than relief. So in such cases you can remove that life support so that person can die with the dignity. So that is called what? Living will. So this is the basis when Supreme Court take a decision on passive euthanasia. So living will is a doctrine which is going to be determined by the Supreme Court in all cases of passive euthanasia. At one instance, it shows that the court's active involvement in such cases, but at the same time, it also questions incompetence of normal legislation in India. Despite being many years and many cases, still Parliament in India have failed to make a comprehensive legislation in the matter of euthanasia. Judicial legislation should be seen as a short-term solution and it should be considered as a last resort. It should be always what? Parliamentary legislation, a legislature's role should be there. So this is what you have to conclude in this question. Fine. Now, how far Indian federal framework being successful in accommodating regional and cultural diversities? Highlight the role of asymmetric federalism and suggest measures to make dispute resolution more effective. So they are asking for what? They are asking for how far? So they are asking to discuss this thing, highlight the role of asymmetric federalism and suggest measure to make dispute mechanism more effective. So when you study the polity and governance both, especially in the polity, when the federal polity is being there, so Administrative Reform Commission, one. Number two commissions on center-state relation. Fine. So two commissions on the center-state relation, Punchi Commission specifically, Administrative Reform Commission, these three organizations, they have suggested how to make center-state relation better. But here they have asked one specific thing, what? Asymmetrical federalism. So asymmetrical federalism and federalism. So first of all, when we talk about the federalism is structure where units are having certain autonomy. Not all autonomy, but certain independent decision-making power. Usually in the federal system, all the units are going to have a equal power. But when certain units are having extra power than other power, then they are called as a what? Asymmetrical federalism. India is a culturally, regionally diverse country. And in order to fulfill those aspirations, India need to accommodate the concept of asymmetrical federalism. And it is well opted in our constitution when we see Article 371 A to D. Even E and F, they also provide lot of rights to certain specific state in order to fulfill their regional as well as cultural aspiration. So you have to anchor Article 371 here in order to address federal framework in order to accommodate regional and cultural diversities. Fine, Article 371, and you also have to accommodate 5th and 6th schedule. So 371, fifth and sixth schedule, with that you will mention this. But despite being able to address accommodation of regional and cultural diversities, still there are certain issues which need to be addressed. And one of the issue is the issue of delimitation. Fine. The delimitation issue need to be addressed. And second issue is the issue related to federal finance. So federal finance and delimitation, these are the two major issues which always question India's federal structure. So these two issues need to be addressed. Fine. And for that purpose, we should go with the suggestions given by those center-state relation commissions, especially Punchi Commission. Fine. So according to the recommendation of Punchi Commission, there is a need to strengthen more and more interstate council. So the federal decisions should not be only taken by whom? The federal decisions should not be taken by only with central government, but the equity-based decision making should be involved in the center-state relation by involving both whom? Center as well as state. So this should be the structure of your answer in this question. So question is not very difficult. Question is basically a classical question which related to center-state relation of the topic. Fine. Now, examine how the separation of power is practiced in India in comparison to rigid presidential model of United States of America. Fine. So, examine how the separation of power is practiced in India compared to rigid presidential model of what? United States of America. In this context, compare the actual authority of whom? Indian Prime Minister with that of President of United States. Fine. So if you'll see one of the most famous book in UPSC Civil Services and especially in the Polity, हम सबकी प्यारी Lakshmikant book. Fine. So in that Lakshmikant book or in any other polity book, they have given the comparison between whom? Indian president versus American president. UPSC will बोला कि ठीक, challenge accepted. We are going to ask you to compare whom? American president with Indian Prime Minister. Modi ji versus Donald Trump. Fine. Let's compare them. Fine. So what system is being there? See, this is highly unlikely question because here the comparison should be made president versus what? President. But here they have asked the comparison between whom? President versus Prime Minister. No, it is not about president versus Prime Minister. It is about de facto power. So there is a concept of de jure power and de facto power. De jure means symbolic power. De facto means actual power. So in Indian system, we have de jure and de facto. President is a de jure power. De jure means symbolic power. De facto means actual power. So in the Indian parliamentary system, the de facto power is in the hand of whom? De facto power is in the hand of Prime Minister. Whereas in US, there is no parallel system of de facto and de jure. There is only de facto power, and that is whom? President. So question have two parts. Fine. First part is what? First part is examine the separation of power. So first what you have to do? Separation of power practiced. Separation of power नहीं पूछा है. Separation of power is practiced. How it is being practiced in India and how it is being practiced in US. So what students usually going to commit a mistake in this question? They will just compare the structure of separation of power in India and structure of separation of power in US, and you will lose the marks. You have to go for what? Practice of separation of power. So in India, separation of power is practiced at where? Separation of power in India, Parliament executive and judiciary. So judiciary is separated in India, judiciary is also separated in US. But in India, executive is coming only of what? Legislature. Whereas there is a strict division at where? US legislature and president executive is completely different. No direct accountability. So in India, when the legislation are being made, fine. So legislation making is going to be much easier in the Indian context. Why? Because legislation are being made by the legislature and Indian Prime Minister control the Lok Sabha. So in India, for Prime Minister, legislation power is quite easy. Whereas in the American system, legislative power of the president is weak. Why? Because if president is from one party, whereas other party is having majority in the both houses, House of Representative and Senate, then they are able to make those laws also which is against the executive will. In India, Prime Minister have the power to go for legislation, but Prime Minister do not have a power to put a veto against any law. Whereas American President have a power to put a veto on certain laws. In India, Prime Minister have a enjoyment of having the control of the house where American President do not have. Third thing, if you'll see the American president, he have a secure tenure, irrespective of who is controlling the house of legislature. But in India, Prime Minister tenure is not secured. He can be remain in the power till then he is enjoying the majority of the house. So tenure security wise, American president is more powerful than whom? Indian president. But when it's about the legislative power, Indian Prime Minister enjoys more effective legislative power over whom? American president. Indian Prime Minister do not have any veto over the legislation. Actually, it is not required. Why? Because Indian Prime Minister enjoys the control over the legislature. Whereas American President, who do not enjoy the control over the legislature, he is awarded with what? Veto power. And that shows the separation of power of check and balance over each and other. But in India, if the ruling party headed by the Prime Minister have control over both houses, then the legislature is completely helpless to control executive. But in US, doesn't matter executive is how much powerful, still legislature have a chance to check and balance. Whom? Check and balance whom? The executive power. These points which you need to discuss here. Fine. And in this context, compare actual authority of Indian Prime Minister with the President of USA. Fine. And then in the conclusion, you have to mention this. Though we have compared the power of President in United States and the power of Prime Minister in the Indian system, Indian parliamentary system have more involvement and functions on accountability and answerability of executive in the legislature. Whereas American system works on purely separation of power, where executive is not responsibility, not having answerable or accountable to the legislature. Fine. So this need to be mentioned in the concluding remark. Both systems are different. Compare kar diya because you have asked, so I have compared. But both systems are having what? Different approach to govern the country. Now, this is basically, I think this is not a question of Indian polity. This is more looking like a question from political science. Pressure group, social movement, corporate lobbies deepen pluralistic democracy in India. Why I'm making this statement, I'll let you know. So till then here, pressure group in the polity syllabus. Fine. Movements, social movements also in the polity syllabus, corporate lobbies, and deepens the pluralistic democracy. Pluralistic democracy, basically, there are the different theories of the democracy, fine, and one of the theory of the democracy is a pluralist democracy, which comes from the theory of power, fine. Anyways, understand this question. Pluralistic democracy in India by representing excluded interest. Analyze whether the growing convergence of corporate wealth and political power poses a threat to autonomy of formal democratic institutions. Fine. Corporate lobbies, social movement, pressure groups. So first understand the idea of the pluralistic democracy. Usually there is a legislature, executive, and judiciary. Fine. So people will vote and they elect their representative, and the political party which is going to hold a majority, it is going to form a government, and that government is going to legislate. But over the years, pressure groups who are having their certain agenda, fine, they are agenda based. For example, Bharatiya Kisan Union, fine. So Samyukta Morcha. So there are certain farmers group, and they are focused on the interest of whom? Farmers. So they will go for certain pressurization of the government. Similarly, NASCOM. So an organization for whom? Organization for businessmen. So organizations of businessmen, organizations of the farmers, organizations of the workers, gig workers. So in this way, they put a pressure on existing political institutions, especially executive and legislature, to make certain laws for their benefit. Similarly, on certain social issues, sometimes the entire public is mobilized to pressurize the government. Recent protest on Jantar Mantar. Before that, in 2013, India Against Corruption. Fine. So such social movements also have forced the government to take corrective measures. So this reflects that how democracy become pluralistic in the nature. In the democracy, usually executive command the system. But now executive do not hold the power. Pressure groups, social movements, and in fact corporate lobbies also impact government's decision-making power, parliament's law-making power. So this usually is symbol of pluralistic democracy. But if these groups are going to be too self-centric, then they are going to disturb the nature of power. For example, if the businessman, they are able to influence government too much, then government makes certain policies by putting environmental concerns aside. Recent protest against the Nicobar project is one of the example where it is being alleged that the government is setting aside the important matter of environmental concern by going for such projects which is environmentally not feasible. Mining project, infrastructure projects are the example where multiple times it is alleged that government is taking a side of whom? Government is taking a side of influential and wealthy corporates. However, in such system of India, where judiciary, which have the power of basic structure, and it can overturn any decision made by the legislature or executive both. In such kind of the powerful judicial system, it is not possible for the government to take completely side of one particular group over the other. So such allegations being put on the pluralistic democracy of India is not correct, because system have strong check and balance to control any kind of the inclusion by any pressure group or through the social movement. So for example, in recent Jharkhand case, what happened? Under the pressure, government have cancelled, but the High Court of the Jharkhand have restored it. So this is a classic example where the social movement have pressurized the government to take certain decisions, but the decision was immediately overturned by the judicial intervention. So such examples shows that ki India is a case of where you have check and balance. Even corporate lobbies may be having an ability to influence whom? Legislature and executive. But the independent judiciary always works as a guardian of everyone's interest. So this is how you have to conclude this answer. Okay? Now, question number 16. Transparency and accountability in the governance are not about controlling corruption, but about creating trust of the stakeholders in the policy process by following rule of law and participatory governance. What is participatory governance? Huh? Participatory governance. Have you ever heard the word citizen charters? Citizen charter. What is citizen charter? तुमने ऐसे किया, बताओ क्या है citizen charter? Yes. So citizen charter is basically speaks about what citizens are going to supposed to get. What we are going to provide. When we run the system, we are running the system with that system, what we are going to provide the citizens. So that need to be mentioned in every ministries and government website ki what citizens are going to get from us. So that is citizen charter. Participatory government or governance is not limited to what you are going to get. Participatory governance is more about to make sure more and more involvement of the people in the governance. People-centric governance. So people-centric governance. For example, have you heard about Mission Karma Yogi? So what Mission Karma Yogi says that? Rule-based order or what based? Rule-based or role-based? Chicken roll nahi. Fine. Your role. R-O-L-E. R-O-L-L-E. Fine. Sir, which roll? Mutton roll or chicken roll? Or veg roll? Nahi bhai. R-O-L-E. Fine. Role based. What is role based here? Role based here ki you are not something like a monarch. You are a part of the system and your policies, your intervention should be citizen oriented. And where it can be implemented? It can be implemented in the waste management. It can be implemented in the urban areas pollution. It can be used in the context of environmental governance. It can be used in the context of AI governance. It can be used in the day-to-day governance, where we expect that the bureaucrats and the government's machinery should going to engage people in the more creative and effective manner. So transparency and accountability usually is associated. These two are basically associated with what? These two are basically associated with to prevent the corruption. But here one concept which is called as legitimacy. Fine. So what the system is required to do right now, system should be transformed in such a manner where more and more participation of the citizens through use of digital resources. Fine. For example, right now government have started actively communicating about any possible of heavy rain or thunderstorm or hailstorm. Government is actively providing the information to whom? Citizens of that particular area in the context of disaster management. Similarly, such initiatives should be taken in the matter of other issues where government is going to assess the people. Fine. So in this question, basically you have to write participatory governance. But participatory governance should be based on what? Rule of law. What is rule of law? What is rule of law? What is rule of law? अरे किसी को पता ही नहीं rule of law क्या होता है? What is rule of law? Everyone is equal before the rule, and you are bureaucrat, then you are not supposed to act arbitrarily. You should act as per the rule. So you are not above the rule. Maybe you are implementing the rule, but it doesn't mean that you are above the rule. So you cannot do those things what you want. You have to do those things only which are being defined by whom? Rules. So while civil servants and government is doing certain activities in order to take people confidence, they must focus on what? They must focus on rule of law. And it is very important in the context of especially Hyderabad. Recent decisions made by whom? Hydra. Fine. So certain decisions of the Hydra is being challenged in the court of law against. It is more and more what? Participatory, where the Hydra is consistently doing what? Consistently engaging the local people in the restoration of lakes. But at the same time, it must have to adhere what? Rule of law. It should not exaggerate its authority. So without exaggeration of the authority, the participation of the people in the actively implementation of the policy is required, so that the transparency and accountability can be maintained. So this is going to be the theme of your answer. Fine. Now, can the constitutional mandate of right-based welfare be effectively raised in the context of non-integrated governance and minimal public investment? Constitutional mandate right-based welfare. What is constitutional mandate right-based welfare? Huh? It is right-based. Is it right-based? Huh? The constitutional mandate of right-based welfare be effectively realized in the context of non-integrated governance and minimal public investment. Examine. So, what you have to examine? Constitutional mandate of right-based welfare be effectively realized in context of non-integrated governance and minimal public investment. So see, when government will go for any policy, fine. So directive principle of state policy directs government to do certain activities. Fine, certain activities for the welfare of the people. So constitutionally mandate coming from where? The constitutional mandate to the government is coming from where? DPSP. Fine. DPSP. So directive principle of state policy provides guideline to whom? Provide guidelines under what? Constitutional mandate. So a constitutional mandate under DPSP gives direction to the government to execute certain welfare policies. But the question is also mentioning one thing: right-based welfare. Fine, right-based welfare. So Supreme Court over the period of time, what they have did, they have extended the scope of many rights: right to education, right to life, right to walk on the pedestrian street. Fine, right to walk on the pedestrian street. So over the year in India, Supreme Court and other constitutional court, through their judgments, they have extended the definition of right-based welfare in India. Fine. So now in India, right-based welfare is there, not only mandated or not only mentioned in the policy level of the government of India. In India, earlier, government is making the policies, and those policies, government is providing the welfare. But now in India, Constitutional courts like Supreme Court and High Court, through their judgments, they have expanded the scope of what? They have expanded the scope of right-based welfare. Case in point, right to education. Fine. So in this context, now what they are asking to examine of non-integration of governance and minimal public investment. So when Supreme Court says that public have a right to walk on the pedestrian street, fine, you have a constitutional right, fundamental right to walk on pedestrian street. What if there is no street? If you do not have a pedestrian street, then where you will walk? Of course, on the road. So the question is, at one side we have right-based welfare. In India, we have right-based welfare. But these right-based welfare can be executed without proper public infrastructure, and unless you will not integrate that right with what? Governance. So any right which is given to the citizen, if rights of citizens, fine, rights of the citizens. So rights of the citizens can be implemented without they are being properly integrated with the governance and public infrastructure. So this is the demand of the question. So right of the citizens can be implemented only when in this regard there is proper governance structure and there is availability of public infrastructure. Case in point, right to education you have made. Fine, right to education you have made. But do you have sufficient amount of schools in your country to accommodate all those children? And even if you have an infrastructure, do you have a proper mechanism for that purpose, so which can ensure that all those kids are being enrolled? So you should need a officer who is looking in the district all those kids are being enrolled or not. He need to coordinate with all the school principals of that area to ensure that all those kids who live in that area, they must get enrolled in that area. So for example, if this is a district, so one education officer, he is looking the parts of this district, fine, and in this way there are the schools in this area, fine, schools in this area, and he is actively engaged with the school principals, local people, especially from vulnerable section, and ensuring that each and every kid of this area which is from unprivileged section is able to get admission in the school. Only then it can be realized. Otherwise, just making that as a right is not enough to make it effectively implement. So this is the demand of the question. So now see the question. So here, constitutional mandate, right-based welfare, integrated governance, public investment. So public investment, integrated governance, then constitutional mandate right. So constitutionally mandated right can be effectively implemented when they are integrated with what? Governance and public investment. So case in point, The right to education can become effective only when the right to education have clear-cut policy with respect to governance. Means the district magistrate, the block development officer, fine, block development officer and the district education officer, school principal, all these are being coordinated with each other, and they are ensuring each and every kid is going to get enrolled. Number one. Number two, if the school infrastructure is not enough to accommodate all the kids, government have to actively invest the money to increase the school infrastructure. Only then it will be there. So, in nutshell, until unless the constitutionally mandated rights are being not properly integrated with the governance, and there should be a fixed public investment, we cannot justify the constitutionally mandated rights. Fine. So we'll start with what? Constitutionally mandated rights in India. Fine. Then we mention the issue of non-effective implementation of constitutional rights. Why in India right-based welfare are not being effectively implemented? We will examine the governance issue, we will examine the public investment issue, and then we will assert that we will make it effective only by what? Integrating the governance and public investment mandate of constitutional right-based structure. Then you are going to answer this. So first identify the problem and then provide the solution. Understood this question? Fine. Next is, should education be treated primarily as a welfare obligation of the state or as a strategic investment for building a globally competitive, knowledge-driven nation? Critically evaluate. So, what do you think? Should education be treated primarily as a welfare obligation of the state? Should education be treated as a primary welfare obligation of the state? Should education be treated as a primary welfare obligation of the state? Yes or no? Do you agree this or not? Yes. So it should not be treated as what? A strategic investment for building globally competitive. Question is or. Question is based on or.
Obligation to address the equity issue. Education should be treated as a primary welfare obligation to address the equity issue regarding the OBC, SC, student enrollment based on the UDIs and ASC reports. So we can consider that education on part is welfare obligation. The other way around, strategic investment, because India's demographic transition and the 65 million of youth lacking in policies.
How you will answer? You're giving statement. That is not enough. You have to answer this question. Education neither can be considered as only as an obligation of the state. Education cannot be considered only as an obligation on the state. And education must be seen as what? Education must be seen as what? Education must be seen for as a strategic investment. Education must be seen as a strategic investment for building globally competitive, knowledge-driven nation. But in order to implement that, we need the policy to involve all stakeholders. And in that, state is a most important stakeholder. So, of course, education should be treated as a strategic investment for building globally competitive, knowledge-driven nation. But for that, state is a central actor, so state's obligation must be there. So state should be obliged for providing education, but state's objective to provide education should not be limited to what? Welfare obligation. State's objective is to provide education as an investment, strategic investment for building nation, globally competitive, knowledge-driven nation. So this is what you are supposed to write. Fine. You should not write in this key you are going to examine ki whether it's a right or wrong. This question look like a critical examination, but you have to reassert. Both are required. Only one is not enough. State's obligation cannot be questioned. State must be obliged for what? Providing welfare point. But at the same time, it should not be limited to welfare obligation. It should be excelling the education. So here the anchor scheme is new education policy, NEP 2020, which also have this line. So basically this question is being directly picked from where? NEP 2020. Fine. So in this way, you have to answer this question by anchoring which scheme? NEP, New Education Policy. Fine. And then I think other two questions have already answered, no? Fine. So this is about paper 2. Paper 2's model answer, you will get it tomorrow. Fine. All the model answers, you will get it tomorrow. Let me finalize it today. Tomorrow, I'll provide the model answer. For paper 3, fine. Paper 3, we will have a discussion tomorrow. You will be notified through mail and message. Okay? Thank you.